Silas Whitmore thought he was just picking up grain and salt. What he got instead was a pair of wide, unblinking eyes staring up at him from inside a supply crate. A baby, alive, breathing, all alone. He stood in his cabin doorway, the crate lid dangling from his hands, heart thudding in his chest. 30 years of silence, solitude, and a life lived miles away from people hadn't prepared him for this. The child was wrapped in a torn blanket, barely a few months old, cheeks still wet from crying. But now, it just stared, calm, almost like it was sizing him up. Silas set the lid down slow, his mind was spinning. This morning had been the first time he'd gone into town in months, trying to stock up before winter. The merchant, a wiry man with darting eyes, had practically given him this crate. Half price, no questions asked. Now Silas understood why. The baby made a faint sound, and Silas instinctively stepped back. 15 years alone on this stretch of land since his wife died. No neighbors, no visitors, no complications. That's how he'd survived. That's how he liked it. But now this child, this helpless, abandoned baby, was rewriting everything. Silas looked out at his tied-up horse, then back to the crate. He could ride back to town, find the merchant, demand answers. That'd be the logical thing to do. But when the baby's little hand slipped free of the blanket and reached into the air, something inside Silas cracked. Those fingers were tiny, fragile, and completely dependent. For the first time in years, Silas felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel: fear. Not of the child, but of what keeping it meant. Or worse, what giving it up might mean. He reached down, hands trembling. As he touched the blanket, the baby wrapped its fingers around his thumb and held tight, stronger than expected. In that split second, Silas knew this wasn't just a moment. It was a decision, one that would change the course of his life. But before he could decide anything, the sound of hoofbeats shattered the silence. Multiple riders, voices he didn't recognize. Silas jolted, heart racing. Someone was coming, and they just might be here for the very thing he'd just found. He slammed the crate shut, shoved it behind some sacks of flour, and stepped out onto the porch. 3 riders emerged from the trees. 2 men in dark coats, a woman in a faded dress, all looking tired, worn down, desperate. The baby whimpered from inside the cabin. Silas gripped the doorframe as they approached. After 30 years of keeping to himself, trouble had finally found its way up his mountain. The lead rider, a broad man with a thick mustache and eyes like river ice, dismounted first. "Afternoon, mister," he said, voice casual but tight. "We're looking for a merchant passed through here. Thin fella, nervous type, drove a wagon full of supplies." Silas didn't blink. "Saw him this morning, bought grain and salt." Then he moved on. The woman edged her horse closer. She looked no older than 25, but something in her face, dark circles under her eyes, a tremble in her hands, made her seem older. "Did he sell you anything strange? A crate, maybe?" Something behind the flour sacks. The baby made a soft, plaintive sound. Silas coughed loudly, stepping forward onto the porch to cover it. But the woman's eyes were sharp, too sharp. "We're missing something. Something that belongs to us. If you have it, we'd be mighty grateful to get I." The younger man behind her shifted nervously. "Tell him about the reward." "So she $50, she said, her voice breaking a little. "For what was taken from us." $50. That was more money than Silas had seen in years. Enough to make it through the entire winter. All he had to do was give them the baby. A child that wasn't his, never had been, and never should have been. Then came the sound again, a faint, unmistakable cry from the cabin. All Thraves. The mustached man's hand drifted toward the pistol on his hip. Silas acted fast. "That's my cat," he said flatly. "Old Tom gets mouthy when strangers—" Elena narrowed her eyes. She didn't buy it. And when the baby cried again, louder, sharper, the bestiff, the mustached man grinned. But it wasn't the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "That's one mighty strange cat you got. Mind if we have a..." Silas moved in front of the door, casually resting one hand on the rifle leaning against the wall. "Private property," he said. "Don't take kindly to strangers poking an animal." The leader took another step forward. No need for hostility, for inside, the Elena dismount sigh, but something in his gut told him it wasn't the truth. Elena's hands trembled as she spoke, but Silas watched the baby's reaction more than her words. "Thomas, if that was really Frank," the younger man leaned close to look at the baby. Elena snapped back fast, too fast. "Of course, I'm sure. He's my son. But Silas wasn't buying it. Neither was the baby. Thomas screamed louder in her arms, arching away from her. That's when Silas knew. These weren't Desper. "You're not his family," Silas said quietly. The mustached man, Jenkins, from what Frank had called him, drew his gun with practiced ease. "Careful now, old man. Elena kept bouncing the child awkwardly, clearly unsure how to hold him. Frank hovered nearby, bleeding but stilling. "You killed his parents," Silas said. Frank's face tightened. Jenkins said nothing. Elena avoided his gaze. "Put him down," Silas said, stepping further into the room. "You don't get it," Jenkins said, gun still trained on him. But Silas had already made up his mind. That child didn't know them, didn't want them, and Silas wasn't about to let 3 murderers vanish into the W. His finger Jenkins dove behind the table. Frank drew, but Silas was faster. His shot slammed into Frank's shoulder, dropping him. Elena screamed, clutching the baby tighter. Jenkins popped up with his gun, but Silas was ready. He dodged, rolled behind the stove, fired again. Missed. Another bullet whizzed by his head, embedding in the wall. W. Because H. Frank try Elena R. Silas B. Stop she T. U. That bro you. How many? Then T. Silas turn.